Welcome to my channel and thank you for watching this video. This is a model simulation of what I consider a plausible, realistic nuclear strike by Russia on the United Kingdom. Now, if you've watched any of my previous videos, you've seen numerous videos that looked at nuclear strikes on the United Kingdom, different NATO countries, the US, and also on the flip side with, Russia and China and North Korea and Iran. What sets this apart is trying to make it plausible and just focus on the United Kingdom at the same time. And so it looks at the first phases, which put my attack plans here. So the first phase, let me do this one at a time, would be a high altitude EMP strike. This would be coming from one of their sub-launch ballistic missiles. These would be detonating high in the atmosphere, and the purpose would be to basically fry electronics. Following that would be counter-force strikes. These are targeting military bases. I'm only focusing on military bases in the United Kingdom. Now I am striking U.S. military bases. And keep in mind that the likelihood that Russia would ever make nuclear strikes against the United Kingdom, but also not be targeting other NATO countries, especially the United States, but also France, who's nuclear armed, Germany, NATO headquarters, it's completely unrealistic. And so this is only representing a small package of what would be larger strikes across multiple countries. So bearing that in mind, unlike some other videos I've made where it looks at worst case scenario if Russia hit it with all the nuclear weapons it had deployed, this is looking at a more realistic thing with just a small portion, because a large portion would be dedicated to striking U.S. targets. There would also be strikes against France, other NATO countries, and they would probably be holding back some for follow-on strikes if need be. Not to mention that there's possible things with China, because again, once you start using nuclear weapons, you don't want to have an adversary, even if they're a nominal ally, on your border who's nuclear armed, and you don't have anything at that point. But here we see counterforce strikes across multiple locations, targeting all the main Royal Air Force, Royal Naval bases, Army, also U.S. ones, joint bases. Most military bases are being touched in some way or another. The final phase will then be counter-value strikes. And again, these will be taking on population centers. London, Manchester, Nottingham, Birmingham, Liverpool. You're going to have Belfast, Glasgow, pretty wide range. You see here multiple angles of attack. And again, this is just a small portion. Russia has approximately 1,700 deployed nuclear weapons. This is just a small portion of their arsenal. So when we see this, keep in mind, yes, casualties could be much higher. If you want to see that, you could take a look at my video, which would be what would a Russian all-out nuclear strike look like on the United Kingdom, which basically, long-term, you would see almost probably 100% loss of life, almost certainly. But again, this is trying to be what would be considered, what I consider a more realistic, plausible one. Again, there's many different levels of this, up to and including limited, tactical strikes versus strategic. And this is kind of where I came upon. So this is what it was going to look like. And we're going to start with the high altitude EMP strike. So let me pull that back up. So I'm going to execute all plans. Whoops. Let me make sure I got that set correctly. Now, I did make a decision because in this nuclear war simulator, the cruise missile strikes aren't very visually, they don't pop out very well. So keep in mind, I'm utilizing the same warhead yield size, but I'm putting these all in strategic level weapons so you can visually see it better. It makes no difference in the simulation as far as casualties go or anything like that. And speaking of which, I'm not modeling directly in here because, quite frankly, the nuclear war simulator doesn't model it very well, which would be missile defense. There is some level. Big one would be the Aegis Ashore in Poland, which would be, heavily targeted by Russia in the, event of strikes. There'd also be, probable U.S. destroyer, ballistic missile ships, other things. But United Kingdom on its own doesn't possess a domestic interceptor for a intercontinental ballistic missile, like the United States with the ground-based mid-course interceptor, or Israel with Arrow 3. China has one they've developed and testing. And so the amount of defense, especially against strategic weapons, would be very limited. So let's go ahead and take a look at it, though. Execute all plans. Put this all to the side. Let's start kicking things off. Hoping to get more content posted. I've been very slow to post recently. If you guys have been following my channel at all, back in late September, early October, relocated, across a few states to start a new job, moved, had to buy a house, sell a house. A lot of other things happened around that time. My wife's father passed away, my father-in-law, while we're doing this. I mean, it's just like one thing after another. And to her credit, my wife was absolutely phenomenal through everything. There was more just her father passing away. I mean, there's quite a few things that, it's not my place to talk about here, but it was really nothing short of amazing how well she was able to persevere through that and go through a relocation out of state and all that good stuff. So we see these are the first EMP strikes. I'm going to go, I don't want to go too fast, but I want to go a little bit faster in this. The nuclear war simulator is doing some pretty nice updates too. They had some updates right around the time I was getting ready to move. And so some pretty good features, the ability to make attack plans and stuff, tremendous improvements there. So I look forward to utilizing this more. And of course, I've been using Command Modern Operations too to model a lot of conventional type of strikes. Let's go here. So these are the ones going to be detonating high altitude. They would not cause very many directly, not cause very many, if any, casualties from the direct blast effects, but it would where you have cars starting to shut down, electronics, you could have hospital, medical equipment. So you'd have a lot of indirect casualties. You wouldn't have direct casualties there. Or it'd be very, very limited. So let me up this a little bit. In fact, I'm just going to switch to 100 because this is just going a little slow for my taste. So we're going to see the counterforce strikes now. And we're going to see some. Again, you're seeing just a portion of the available weapons. And here you have military bases across the United Kingdom being hit. And now we have counter value strikes. All told, I'd say it's roughly about 12% of the Russian arsenal. Let's go and take a look at casualties. All right. So in the United Kingdom, we're looking at 14.24 million casualties, 22% of the population. Then we move to the United Kingdom, so I'll see it better. Destroyed 1.7 million barrels per day of refining capacity. 6,485 megawatts of destroyed power plants. 5 civilian airports, 131 destroyed hospitals, 18 destroyed harbors, 45.8 million barrels of oil destroyed. So on top of the direct casualties, you'd have another 2.2 million cancer fatalities, 137,000 square kilometers evacuated. So what does that mean? Okay, does that mean in this circumstance, and let's kind of zoom in here a little bit. Let's take a look at fallout. There's fallout short term, fallout long term. So what does this mean? Am I saying that only 14.2 million, 22%, so that means what, 78% of the population is going to live? No. That's some initial casualties. Again, you have the other 2.2 million for cancer, but also look at your major city right here. Cities. Look at that. Think about food. Think about medical supplies. Think about all those basic necessities, clean water, everything that you need to survive in the coming months after a strike. The casualties would exponentially rise after this. So, especially when you have some of your strongest allies, like the United States would be getting struck, France, Germany, your NATO countries, Poland, any potential adversary. I mean, you could see strikes in Turkey. Despite what people think, Turkey's always been a strong NATO ally. And who knows what involvement, you would see with China in that equation. Be a huge loss of lives. So it'd be growing exponentially. Would it be a total loss? No. But we would see a pretty massive loss. And so what we'd find is you'd be a lot of Darwinism, strongest survival of the fittest, basically, because in a lack of supplies, people are going to die off. People with medical conditions, stuff like that. If you're reliant on like oxygen tanks, if you're reliant on medical care, maybe you had cancer prior to the nuclear strikes, we can forget about it. You're not going to get medical care, not in these circumstances. Your government would be operating under very limited circumstances. Those that survived. If you're interested in this topic, I highly suggest you watch a movie called Threads. Now, again, bear in mind that what we know about nuclear winter and situations from that has changed since the 80s. But it's still one of the better ones because it doesn't look at just what happens with the nuclear strikes now. It looks at what happens down the road. Lack of education, to where the kids are speaking in a barely functioning form of English at that point. Or your basic Scottish lingo, whichever you want. But don't hate me, I'm Scottish, so. Anyways, among other things. So, that's that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more content. Please like and subscribe if you haven't before. If you have any comments, any feedback. I'm also looking for collaborators. So if anyone's interested in these kind of things, drop me a message. I'd love to collaborate with some people on this. I'm certainly not the be-all, end-all by any means. In fact, there's people out there far more educated on the subject than I am. So, leave me a message. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.